forget to like, share, and subscribe and hit that notification bell.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Guyanese Swag Trailblazing Voices. My name is Key McKay. I am your host, and we bring you interviews from leaders across the diaspora who are shakers and movers and they feel getting things done, y'all. Today we have with us a renowned fashion stylist. She's a blogger and a fashion enthusiast. I'm talking about Soni Kohli. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. How are you?
Fine, thank you. I'm really excited that we're getting the opportunity to have this conversation.
Likewise. It's been a long time coming.
Yes. The first question I ask everyone is, where were you born?
So I was born in New York, in Manhattan, but my mom is Guyanese and my dad is Indian, from India.
Oh, wonderful. So having both parents who were immigrants and from two different parts of the world, that was a very big contrast because your father was born in India and your mom was born in Guyana. What was that like in your household culturally?
Well, there's a lot of similarities. As a lot of people know, there were many people who came to Guyana from India, so they carried with them a lot of the cultural aspects from India, and they're now part of Guyanese culture. But there are still many differences, and I think people sometimes don't realize that Indians from India are very much different from Indo-Caribbeans. And there are a lot of pros to both type of Indian and both origin. And I feel lucky to be able to experience both sides of that. And also to be in part of a mixed family that like allows me to get to know many different cultures.
What was some of the major differences between the two cultures?
Definitely. I mean, there's a lot, honestly. There's language differences. My dad speaks like 4 languages and I don't speak them because there was just never any need for him to teach me and my sister growing up because our mom only speaks English, which is the primary language in Guyana. And my parents met in New York, so they both speak English fluently. There's also a lot of differences in the food. While some of the things might be the same, like both cultures have different forms of curries and stuff, a lot of the ingredients are very different. So like the dish is the same, but how you get there is different. Some of the holidays are the same holidays, but they're called different things or they're celebrated differently. So I think there are just a lot of cases of like there being a thing that is shared across both cultures, but interpreted or celebrated or done very differently by each of the cultures.
I love it. As a kid growing up, what were some of the perks of having multicultural parents?
Well, I grew up in New Jersey for the most part, and there were a lot of Indians from India in New Jersey, the part that I was raised in. There's not a ton of Guyanese people in that part of New Jersey. And so I think I was definitely more influenced by my dad's culture growing up or the culture of different Indians around me growing up. But it was always very fun because I was able to kind of bring in a unique perspective compared to the environment that I was in because there weren't a lot of Guyanese people and there weren't a lot of mixed people of color either. So I think that was something that was unique that I had to deal with growing up because it like, you know, for every kid, being different can be hard. And it wasn't something I entirely understood until I was older, but it still allowed me to be able to have a different experience than a lot of the kids around me. I felt like I was brought up by very well-rounded parents because my parents are from different places. So they had to be open-minded individuals going into the relationship and bringing up their kids. So I think it just gave me a really good foundation in childhood for having a well-rounded perspective and being multicultural as an individual.
Growing up and being multicultural, as you mentioned, and having those different dynamics where in situations you might have been the only one, or you felt different, or you were basically the minority in some situations. What were some of the challenges that presented for you, and how were you able to overcome those challenges?
There were a lot of challenges, to be completely honest, because it wasn't really like being multicultural wasn't really something that was common around me growing up. A lot of people of color tend to, especially in America, marry and have kids within their culture because it's comfortable and it's natural and it feels easy. And my parents did something different. And I don't think that people in both cultures were always the most welcoming of that idea, just because a lot of traditional Indian and just like person of color mindset is, keep within your traditions. And so my parents being kind of like trailblazers in that area of life, made me stand out a little bit more and made it sometimes hard for them to connect to other parents for sure, and also for me to connect to other children, because I would come to the table at a young age, not really understanding why I didn't share similar experiences with the rest of the kids my age who looked like me and maybe were also Indian like me, but I just had such a different upbringing that it was hard to relate to. And it wasn't until I was older that I realized a lot of these people just don't have a multicultural background or experience, and that is why they can relate to one another, because they all have a very similar experience, shared experience within that culture. But I was the one who had a little bit of a different experience. And so I think it did always make it so that I was a little bit different from everybody else, and which made it hard to connect to everybody else. I think that like not knowing the language of my father's country and his background made me stand out a little bit more too. I did Indian dance for a long time throughout my childhood and through university. And that meant being around people from that culture all the time, which was great. I was really in touch with my roots. But being around adults, especially in that culture, they saw me and saw that I didn't speak the language, or my mom didn't look like them, or I didn't prioritize the same things as them or celebrate the same holidays. And it made it harder for me to relate. And I think it also made it hard for them to understand what I was. And that takes a long time to get. As a kid, you don't really get it. You just feel, okay, I'm different. Not really sure why, but I am. Then when I got older, I realized I just had a unique upbringing, and it definitely benefited me way more in life the older I got and the more I understood it, and also became more proud of it. Yeah.
Being having parents who were trailblazers and growing up from very birth being a trailblazer, how has that shifted your perspective? And even not even shifted, how did that shape your perspective, and how did it help you become stronger as a person?
Yeah. Well, I think that it definitely gave me a foundation for being more open-minded from a very young age. I never had a narrow idea of what relationships look like, marriage, culture, families. And at first, when I was young, I didn't understand why I had that perspective. I just had it. And I thought, oh, like not everybody thinks this way. That's odd. And then as I got older, I understood it's because I have that background. And it's not a fault of anybody else. It's just like when you're raised that way, it's easier for you to understand. So I think that it really set me up to be open-minded and well-rounded, because I was knowledgeable about different cultures throughout my life, and my parents really prioritized that. They may be from different countries, but the rest of my family are actually from different countries as well. I have a pretty diverse family overall, from all over the world, and I feel very, very lucky and blessed to have that. But it meant that we were celebrating holidays that other Indian or even Guyanese kids weren't celebrating. And so I was knowledgeable about like uh, Christian holidays or whatever it may be, that was different from my peers. And I think that being in that diverse, being a part of that diverse family just let me really appreciate knowledge, appreciate other people, diverse experiences, be more accepting of those, and just, I don't know, set me up to be like more progressive of a person. Um, which are, I think, lessons that a lot of people learn throughout life, but sometimes it can be through the hard way. And I feel that I was lucky to learn those things at a young age, because that's just the family I was born into. And I got started at a young age, I suppose. So um, yeah, I don't know. I think that a lot of the time people of color and especially children of immigrants of color go through life fighting a lot of the battles that their parents fought, and they feel the need to unlearn generational trauma and fix some of the problems that come with being part of traditional families, closed-mindedness and some things that everybody wants to overcome, but it can be really hard when you're doing it as a child of immigrants and still trying to retain a relationship with your family. And I think that being part of the diverse family that I'm a part of, with so many different kinds of immigrants, a lot of those lessons were my family are more receptive to those lessons because of the things that they went through, and because they're all from different places, so they had to really learn to be open-minded and willing to work on things and evolve traditions instead of being kind of held back by them, because otherwise our family wouldn't work. And it does with all of these diverse people, not just my parents. So yeah, I think that's just definitely a huge benefit to them being from different places.
I love it. Your childhood definitely sounds fascinating, and so does your family. At what point did fashion become a part of that conversation? Was that something that you were into as a kid growing up, or is it something that evolved as you became an adult?
Yeah, definitely. Something I was into from a very young age. My dad is very into fashion as well. He's always been the one to pick out the clothes for all of us. I have a younger sister, so my sister, me, and my mom, and my dad was always really interested in fashion, and he was definitely, I think, unlike a lot of maybe immigrant dads, he was more willing to let us use fashion as a form of self-expression, which is something that I kind of fit into very naturally because of how he raised me. And it wasn't always easy. Immigrant dads can be a little bit strict and stuff, but because he loved fashion, it was something that I just flowed into very naturally. And I think at fifth grade, I decided I wanted to be a fashion designer. I remember that distinctly because I kept a notebook of designs that I still have. And since then, I've decided I don't want to be a fashion designer. It's not entirely my thing, but I knew from a young age I wanted to do something in that area. And then throughout my life, I think in the beginning of high school for me, so around like 2012, 2013, I started like blogging on Instagram, basically just posting outfit of the days. And in high school, a lot of people would make fun of me, not like seriously, but like they would tease me as, oh, the outfit of the day girl, because I would post photos of my outfits online. And I think through doing that, I learned that, oh, I like dressing up, not necessarily designing things, but I like styling things. And I don't think I knew that being a stylist was a job back then, but once I got to university, I definitely knew. And I think at the end of university, by the time I had gone through school and sort of figured out my career path a little bit more, I realized, okay, styling is an option. That's a job. It's not really blogging that I want to do. I love doing that and sharing with people, but what I love the most is working with people and helping them feel confident about themselves in their clothes. That's my favorite thing to do. Always love dressing up my mom and my sister and my grandma, and like helping them, even my dad, helping them find outfits. So it was a long path, I think, discovering exactly the job I wanted to pursue that was in line with my hobbies. But in hindsight, it makes a lot of sense because my dad, who introduced me to fashion, was kind of a stylist in his own right. He's always been the stylist of the family. And so if I had known that was a career path back then, I think it might have been a little more clear cut, but I'm glad I got to that point the way that I did, because it helped me learn a lot of different things and trial and error, a lot of different things.
First of all, I love how untraditional your family is. Typically, it's the women that's into fashion, well, quote unquote, but to have a father who's into fashion and have him expose you into that world and make it comfortable for you to be yourself and express yourself with fashion, what an amazing gift that was. And then going into adulthood and realizing that, hey, this is an opportunity or this is a career pathway. Many times we see people who are creative, sometimes society aren't always receptive to them or receptive to their ideas because it's not the quote unquote clear pathway from point A to point B of this is how you make money, or this career path has a long-standing history of providing healthcare benefits and retirement funds and whatnot. That's not always the case for creatives. Making the decision to say, I want to pursue fashion and becoming a fashion stylist as a professional, what was that like for you having that conversation? Or did you even need to have that conversation with your parents to say, hey, I'm going down this pathway versus the traditional path of becoming a doctor or a lawyer or whatnot? Did you have to have a conversation with your parents, and what was that conversation like, if so?
Yeah, you touched on a good point. My family is very untraditional. There are definitely some things that they retain from immigrant life and everything, but like we talked about before, one of the things that really made me stand out from my peers, who may have been the same cultural background as me, may have been Indian or Guyanese growing up, but made me stand out, is that my family is very non-traditional. And when it came time to applying to colleges and picking kind of a career path or telling them what I wanted to do, or even just being in school, they were never the kind of parents that pushed me to do one career or be successful in what success means to them. And I'm very grateful for that. And I always have been very lucky because, unfortunately, in my peers, I don't think growing up I've ever seen anybody whose parents supported them in that way. And I know that it comes from, back being an immigrant, like there's so much stress that comes with that. And I'm just very uniquely lucky in my experience that my parents were able to overcome their own traumas and allow me and my sister to pursue the things that we wanted without any criticism. So it was never really a conversation of, this is what I want to do and I hope you accept me. Will you support me? I never really had to do that, and I'm very lucky. I am and was still very interested in art, and my entire life my parents thought I was going to go to art school to be a painter. I'm pretty good at painting, I suppose, and I love painting, and they always thought I'm going to be a painter. And it wasn't until I was getting ready to go to college, like I had already decided on my school. It wasn't until I was getting ready to go that I said, I'm not going to go to art school, and I want to pick something that will give me more of a stable career. And they were kind of shocked because they were like, you love art, like why wouldn't you do that? And I was very influenced by my peers to pick something that would be a good career, because that's what I was always around, and I was the different one. So although I was very lucky to have the parents that I had that were really supportive, I felt a little bit like, am I doing the right thing? Because everybody around me is going to be a doctor, a business person, an engineer, whatever it may be. And I wasn't sure if art school was the right thing. So I ended up going to school for genetics and science, which I do love. And I loved, and I worked in a cancer research lab and I loved it. But I knew it wasn't for me. I was ignoring the creative side of me. And while I was in school, I was pursuing an art history major. So I was doing both so that I could keep doing something that I loved, because I love art history. And I got to the point throughout school where I was like, I need to tap into the creative side more. There's got to be a way that I can mesh art history or something creative with something that will make me feel secure and will also help me help my parents out in the long run. Because even though they weren't pushing me to be a doctor or have a stable career or whatever, I still knew that sometimes it is really hard to be a creative. That's the reality of it. And there's got to be an in between where I could do something that I love and also have a secure future that would help me help out my family in the future, or at least give my parents the peace of mind that I would be okay, even though that's not what they were asking for. So throughout university, I switched majors towards the end of university, actually, to do a communications and PR major alongside art history. And that major was essentially like marketing. It wasn't the marketing major, but it was essentially the same thing. And that's what I ended up doing out of school. And I don't think I would have, similarly to how I didn't know being a stylist was a job, I didn't really know that working in creative marketing was also a job option when I first started university. And I ended up loving it, and I still am loving it. And it gives me the ability to do that, something that I'm passionate about and can be creative in my professional life, but also the balance that allows me to be a stylist on the side and work on other creative projects, all the while being in a professional field that allows me to help my parents in the long run. I hope that wasn't too long.
No, not at all. First of all, how selfless of you, and it really is a tribute to how amazing of a person you are to say that, hey, I have parents who supported me and were willing to let me go out and do whatever it is that makes me happy. But in retrospect of thinking about the long run, that one day my parents are going to be older, my parents are going to need my help. I'm not just going to think about myself and what I want right now. I'm going to think about the future and what can help me help them in the long run. That's, wow, what an amazing person you are for even just having that at such a young age, because most people would have been like, well, whatever makes me happy, that's what I'm going to do. And you still, in doing that, you were able to find something that created a balance of happiness for you,
Exactly.
but at the same time still give you stability. Wow, that's really amazing. As a professional now, and having the benefits of both worlds, of the creative outlet and the stability of a career, what advice would you give to the next generation that's coming up behind us, and they might be on that path of, what do I choose after high school? All of my friends are choosing this. My family wants me to do this. I want to do this. What advice would you give to the next generation?
Definitely, and I give this to my generation as well, and it may not always be received that well, because I think there's a lot of fear that comes along with choosing your career path. And I understand that completely, but what I always say is, do the thing that you're passionate about, because that's the thing that you'll do best. You can go and become a doctor and study to be a doctor, but if you don't really want to do it, you'll never be as good as the person who wants to be a doctor. But if you go and chase a job at being a stylist that maybe is not so secure and a little harder to get there, but you're really passionate, you're going to be way better than any other job you would have chosen. So I always tell people to just do what they're passionate about. There is a job out there that can combine maybe the stability of one of those traditional career paths with a creative field that you might truly be passionate about. There is a job out there for everyone. It might take a long time to get there. You might have to switch jobs along the way. You might have to work 2 jobs. I've been there, but it is so worth it to chase the thing you're passionate about, because like I said, you'll be the best at it that you possibly could be. You'll be better than other people who don't necessarily care about it the way you do, and you'll be very, very happy. You'll be fulfilled from within. And I think that's very important to have, especially if you are a creative person in nature. You have to go after the thing that you're passionate about, creative things that you love doing, because that's going to fuel you from within. If you go after the office job that you think is going to be stable and, maybe the right thing to do, you'll be burnt out. And I say that from experience, because I've definitely been there and had to make hard decisions for myself. But I think that, another thing that my mom tells me all the time is that the right thing or the better thing is not usually the easy thing. The hard thing is usually the better thing to do. You know, good things don't come easily. Things that are good for you and better you in the long run, those are usually the hard things, the challenges. And that may be chasing the creative dream that you have. Might be hard at first, but your passion will get you through that. I strongly believe that.
Wow, what a golden piece of advice. On that note, we're going to take a break for a message from today's sponsor, and we'll be right back.
Meet Kim. She recently moved to a new neighborhood and has a craving for pine tart and cheese rolls. She Googled Guyanese restaurants in her neighborhood and received recommendations for Ghanaian restaurants instead. While she was at the park walking, her dog Kim ran into Susan, a fellow Guyanese, who introduced her to the Guyanese Swag Business Directory, a comprehensive listing of reputable Guyanese-owned businesses across the diaspora. Kim now regularly visits the GuyaneseSwag.net, where she can easily find trusted and reliable Guyanese-owned businesses and stay updated on upcoming events throughout the diaspora. Since the directory offers detailed business profiles, including pictures, videos, specials, contact information, and even reviews from neighbors, Kim is able to stay connected to her roots in her new home away from home. Register your business for free by visiting GuyaneseSwag.net.
Hello and welcome back. For those of you who are just joining us, we're here today with Soni, who is an amazing fashion stylist, a fashion enthusiast, and a fashion blogger. She was really on a roll with some really amazing advice, and I want to pick back up where we left off. Soni, for the person who's watching this video or they're listening to this audio, and they want to get into the fashion industry, whether it's to be a designer or a stylist or in the marketing aspect or sales or whatever, any aspect of the fashion world, what are some practical things that they should be doing right now to prepare themselves for a successful career in that industry?
Yeah, definitely working on a portfolio, and this doesn't have to be anything super fancy at all. It could mean dressing yourself up in what you have at home if you want to be a stylist and taking photos of it, and putting that in a folder online. It doesn't have to be a website. You know, there are small steps that you can take. Or if you want to be a photographer, taking photos of everyday life or asking your friends to model, and eventually maybe you'll get to the point where you can work with real models. Just taking that first step is extremely important. And then I would also say that networking, and this is something I'm still working on, and I think everybody works on for the rest of their career, in a creative space especially, but networking is so important. Building connections with everyone that you meet in any capacity. You never know where life is going to take those people, and you never know what's going to come out of those relationships. And that's why I think it's really important to always be putting your best foot first, making the best impression you possibly can, and being an active member of whatever community you're looking to be a part of. I think it can be really hard to enter creative spaces sometimes because it's so stressful for a lot of the members of these communities, because it feels like everybody is competing for the limited amount of jobs that there are or opportunities or whatever. But that's just not true. Opportunities are infinite. And even though it can feel like that a lot of the time when you're in that space or in that community, I think that it's really important that creatives in general and us as a community start evolving towards being more open with others and sharing opportunities and taking that step to really build a honest and genuine network. And so I think, like, if you're in university, make those connections, carry them out, continue them into your professional life, continue to follow up with people, maintain relationships and stuff like that is really important.
You touched on something that I want to dig deeper into, that when you're in that any community, whether it's you're an accountant and you're in the accountant association or fashion and you're in that community, any community that you're into, that in one way it's feeding your career and it's sharpening you because you're around people who are in your industry and it's helping to keep you sharp and give you that competitive edge. At the same time, it can sometimes put on a blinder and make you feel like there's not enough for all of us. How do you maintain a balance of knowing that there's an infinite amount of opportunities and that it's not limited to what's in this community, but at the same time, surround yourself with peers who challenge you and sharpen you to be the best that you can be.
Yeah, I think that's something that I'm still working on. It's very challenging, and I think that if we maintain an open and honest conversation about what everyone is going through, that's the best way to set up the space for being genuine and a place where people are helping each other and don't feel like they have to gatekeep things or like there isn't enough to go around. So I think that it's very important to, like I said, put your best foot forward and do treat people the way that you want to be treated, even if it may be hard, because you're setting up the space for or setting up the position for the next person who's coming after you to be in a more comfortable spot. You're kind of paving the way for them. So I think that it may be hard a lot of the time because we're all feeling that pressure. We're all feeling like success is finite and there aren't enough opportunities to go around, but there are genuine people in these communities, even under that pressure. And I think that, being that open, honest person will help you attract people who also feel the same way and make others feel comfortable in coming forward about how they genuinely feel, sharing opportunities, etc. It's very easy to get sucked into maybe a little bit of the superficiality that exists within creative communities, but trust me, that doesn't go anywhere in the long run. And those people, they also want the genuine relationships that you want or other people want. So if you put yourself out there a little bit, to do the work a little bit for the rest of the community, it will come back to you tenfold. And just think it's really important that we continuously remind ourselves of that, and that it's just not true that there are limited opportunities. There are opportunities everywhere. And it's the closed-mindedness and the anxiety that comes with that way of thinking that sort of brings out the worst in people. And so if you avoid that, I think you'll be golden. You'll attract good people and more opportunities and just create that space that you want to be in. You also have to do the work a little bit in that way too.
What an amazing piece of advice. As a fashion stylist, what was the first opportunity that you got, first paid opportunity that you got to be a stylist, and what did that opportunity mean to you?
First paid opportunity. I think it was through one of my mom's friends who is, middle-aged and was feeling a little bit like I need a wardrobe refresh to feel good about myself. I think a lot of women can feel that way as they approach a certain age. And that opportunity meant a lot to me. Not just because it was my first paid opportunity. This was a couple of years ago, but mostly because it was a real example of how you can make a very big impact on somebody's life. And that's why I like styling, because I was able to help this person feel confident and feel better about themselves, and also do something that they had been putting off for so long that was creating a little bit of anxiety at the back of their head for a long time. And they just felt like they couldn't really tackle it because they didn't have that helping hand or guidance. And if I can provide that and be paid for it and make it part of my job, that's just the cherry on top of everything. It was a very real example of how being a creative is something that's very important in the world. I think a lot of people diminish creative careers and jobs and creative work in general, because we've become, as a society, especially in America, might be different in other countries, but especially in America, such a capitalist, industrialized society that focuses on the bottom line, very individualistic. Whereas a lot of us, especially people of color, come from countries where the communities are a lot more collectivist. They're a lot more about sharing the wealth. Your job plays a role in society. And I think those communities, although they may not be as monetarily prosperous as America, those countries have higher rates of happiness and better health, because these people are happy doing jobs that benefit society. They are looking beyond the dollar. Obviously, this is a very nuanced conversation, and there's many other things that contribute to quality of life. But I think that collectivism in those countries where we come from, Guyanese people and Indian people come from, that provides for better life quality. And when you bring that into the job that you're doing, a lot of creative jobs fill that need in society. Like being a stylist helps people feel confident, take a stress off of their plate. If getting dressed is not their favorite thing to do, it's helping them at the end of the day. And when you help somebody like that, you're fulfilling this very basic human need to do good. And that's something that a lot of people can achieve in pursuing their creative career. And you're also, while you feel great about yourself because you're doing good for somebody, you're also helping the community as a whole. And I think that's often overlooked as a role that creatives play in a community, especially in America.
I want to double back on something you said. First of all, as a fashion stylist, and how you talked about earlier, not knowing that was a career pathway. Let's double back on that for a moment and drill a little bit deeper. For the person who's listening, watching, and they've never heard the word fashion stylist, and like you, they didn't know that was a career pathway. Give us an overview in terms of the daily life of a fashion stylist, what exactly that job entails, and what somebody can look forward to in that career field.
Yeah, I guess every day is different for a lot of creatives. They can relate. Every day is different. It depends if you are on set or working with, for me, it would be maybe a personal client, so at their house or on a video call. But let's say it's a day working on something for a brand. Maybe you're on set. So I think that usually call time is very early. You're prepping things beforehand. You want to get your styling kit ready, which would include, safety pins and clips and fashion tape and stuff like that. You go to the set, you're usually on your feet for a very long time, communicating with the creative director on set or maybe the photographer. Oftentimes creative jobs involve working with the other creatives constantly, which is why networking is so important and why being a pleasant, sociable person is a big part of being a creative. So you'll be on your feet for a long time, adjusting things, helping models put things on. I think it's really important to be outspoken as well, because if you see something that is maybe not looking so right, you have to be confident in your own knowledge and come forward with that, because it's going to affect the product. And creative jobs take a lot of effort, and they're not necessarily like an Excel sheet you can go back to and edit the next day. You can't go and change that model's outfit, so it's very important you're active in your job. Same thing goes for the photographer and the model and the creative director, anybody you're working with. So this can apply to any job. But yeah, as a stylist, it's very important that you're like constantly running around, being very, very involved. And there's a certain level of confidence that comes with doing that. And then maybe after you're done styling the person or the model or whatever it is for the brand, usually there's some time afterwards to kind of fit in last minute things. These kind of jobs can be very, very go, 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 go. And I think it's important to keep time of what you're doing constantly, because a lot of the time things run over, and that is money. Renting out a studio is money, or working with whoever photographer is money. So that's something that I've noticed repeatedly on set, is keeping track of time is extremely important. And then afterwards, say you're done with that project, I think a lot of the time, like I said, networking is really important. So maybe making time after the project to go get some coffee with the photographer or with the models, and just continue to build that relationship. Half of a creative job is the relationship that you have with people. That's so true. So yeah, by the end of the day, maybe you'll go back home and review the images from a photographer, or communicate to the brand how it went. Again, more communication. And I think then you start back up the next day, maybe reaching out to some people who need help or answering emails. There is a slightly corporate or office-like aspect to every creative job as well. So I think that people should be aware of that. You know, you're going to be on your email just as much as maybe somebody who works in finance, but it's a different kind of communication and experience. But there still is that aspect.
I love it. Let's talk about communication, because you said that word repeatedly. As a stylist who have to communicate to corporate, to the brand, to all these different aspects, to the model, and each of these different roles requires a different style of communication. Let's talk specifically about communicating to a model or to your client that, hey, this outfit might not be the best one for you. It doesn't bring out the best features in you. How do you communicate something so personal and so delicate effectively in a gentle way that doesn't make somebody feel like, oh my God, she's saying I'm ugly?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think that there are two sides to that question, right? Because when you're a stylist and you're on a editorial commercial job where you're working with a brand or maybe a professional model and professional creatives where a company has brought you all together, there's a level of understanding with everyone that it's not a personal comment if the stylist says, hey, that doesn't look so great. Definitely doesn't mean I need to say, oh my God, that looks ugly, that looks horrible. No, that's not the way to handle anything. I think even when you're a creative, there's a level of professional conversation that needs to be held at a level of decorum. And I think that sometimes creatives can definitely forget that, but there's a reason why professional conversation is a thing, and it's because it provides a baseline level of comfort for everyone and respect. And when you're on an editorial or a commercial job, there's that level of understanding because everyone was kind of hired for that. So the model already knows it's not personal, it's just about the brand. But on the other hand, if I'm working on a personal styling project, for example, like with my mom's friend who I helped out, they may not be used to being criticized in that way. So I think as a stylist, it's really important. And when I begin to work with a client, I have a list of questions that I send out, and a lot of them are very personal. Do you have any triggers that maybe you feel I should be aware of so that we don't touch on them? Have you had any, do you have any preference with clothing or strong preference against something? And by sending out those questions beforehand, I have a level of understanding of what this client is going to be like, what their emotional relationship to clothing and how they look is, because that's a very real factor and something everyone experiences. And so getting those questions out of the way in a very professional way, because I send them through email and my emails are not casual, even though I'm a creative, it's very professional. And then that provides a level of comfort for the person who I'm communicating with. They can tell me beforehand anything they're worried about. But then when you're working with them in person, it's really important to be a listener constantly, provide a safe space for who you're working with, and really talk to them as if you would talk to your friend, professionally, of course, but very empathetically. And that way you can listen and understand what perspective they're coming at this situation, the styling job with. So if maybe they're not so secure about something, if you're actively listening, you'll be able to tell. You know, humans are naturally empathetic in that way, I think. And so if you set up a space for that, and you can even be as blunt as saying, hey, I know this can be really stressful. Do you want to talk to me about how you're feeling right now before we go into this? Setting up that space and being direct in addressing it can be extremely helpful to people. And then throughout the process, just being very open and honest, but in a kind way, like you're talking to your friend or your younger self. Understanding that if you were to put yourself in that person's shoes based on what you've seen, based on what they've said about their triggers or things that bother them, how would you feel? It requires a lot of emotional intelligence, I think, to be a creative, especially one that works with another person, and also a level of empathy. And it's just I will stress that a lot because I think in creative spaces and jobs, a level of empathy is so important. And when you maybe go off into corporate life after college, empathy isn't really at the top of the minds of a lot of people in corporate culture, which makes it so draining. But if you go off and do that, and then maybe you pivot to creative space, it's important to remember this is a different situation, and that empathy should be at the forefront of everything that you do. It'll really benefit all the communication that is being done.
Wow. There's so many more questions that I want to ask you, but I obviously want to be respectful of your time. To bring the conversation full circle, I could not let you leave without asking, what are some everyday tips that the average everyday person can use in their life to spruce up their wardrobe, to just even boost their confidence with their fashion?
Yeah, I would say, okay, the first one that comes to mind, which when I'm in a rut and I don't know what to wear, there's two things that I do. One is get off of social media because we're constantly being influenced by other people's tastes and opinions way more than, and I know I'm on social media, so maybe this isn't the best example, but if you really think about it, humans are not meant to be exposed to so many opinions constantly. Of course, you're going to be anxious. Of course, your thinking is going to be influenced. Of course, you won't feel in touch with yourself if you're constantly being told something different. So I think it's really important to take a step back from social media, from trending things, and look at your closet and think, what are some things that I bought that like I really love, that I went with my gut and I was like, I really do love these things. It was instinctual, and focus on those things. And then the second thing, which is slightly what's the word? Antithetical to what I just said, is to use Pinterest. I know that's social media, but it's a little bit different from Instagram or TikTok or Facebook or something, because you're not really seeing content from the point of a person's point of view. It's just sort of like a mood board. And so once you've taken a step back and you're away from Instagram and other people's opinions on clothing and trends, go on Pinterest and start to look up things that you discovered you really genuinely like from your kind of self-reflection previously. Look up those things, and Pinterest algorithm is really great. I think it's really great. Things that I love that I never even thought of are brought to me by the algorithm because of how it works. And I just think that I'm constantly introduced to new ideas that are in line with my tastes, but still a little bit more fresh because Pinterest's algorithm is so good. And I don't feel that pressure from society or from other people's opinions or points of view, because Pinterest just doesn't work like that. There's no profile page for people. There's no, you're following so and so and it's your friend from high school and they have a strong opinion on this. It's just a mood board. It's just creative things, photos that can spark that creative fuel within you. And so I love that as a social media platform. And I definitely think that's kind of the future of where social media is going.
My last and final question for you, for those who listen to this conversation, they watch the video and they're loving everything you're saying, they want to connect with you, they want to hire you, how can they get in contact with you?
Yeah, so I have a website. It's my name, sonikohli.com, and there's a contact form on there if you're interested in styling services. But I also am very active on Instagram and TikTok, sharing some of my journey and also just personal styling choices. And you are more than welcome to DM me on any of those platforms. I am pretty responsive and open to any conversation on there. If you have questions about styling, I'm more than happy to help you. Or if you just want a little bit of inspiration that I hope comes off as a genuine, honest person on social media, because that is what I'm aiming to be. So yeah, you can find me there or on my website.
I love it. Thank you so much for stopping by, Soni. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I know for the people who are listening and watching, they enjoyed it as well. Do you have any final words of wisdom that you would like to share with the audience?
Words of wisdom would be, don't be afraid to chase your passion, because it will provide you the best quality of life and be most in touch with your true self, and remember to carry out that empathy in everything that you do, because it will set you up for success both in work and with relationships with other people.
What an amazing note to end this conversation with. Soni, you are filled with so many golden nuggets, and I think that your personality is definitely one of them. Thank you for stopping by. I enjoyed this conversation. Thank you guys for watching and for being a part of the Guyanese Swag community. Don't forget to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. Drop us a comment to let us know how Soni has inspired you. While you're down there in the comments, click the descriptions and click the link to connect with Soni. She's amazing. The work that she's doing is amazing. And as you guys can tell, she's really passionate about helping, and not just helping in a way that pleases her, but pleases you. So thank you guys. Go out and have yourself a phenomenal day. Peace.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe and hit that notification bell.